If you're in business today, you probably work with people, and working with people presents its own set of challenges, opportunities, and risks. And that's where our next guest comes into play. Mike Lyons is an HR consultant, speaker, and trainer in the national marketplace based here in Central Texas. He helps organizations with everything from basic blocking and tackling to major HR initiatives. Today, he's here today to help us all not get sued. Let's go talk to Mike.
You are now listening to the Stark Lane podcast.
Mike, we've known each other for, I think, 3, 4, 5 years now. You've had your hands in a lot of different things. But is it fair to say that HR and HR consulting in the national market is your primary game?
Absolutely. Yeah. I'm one of those crazy people. I think I was actually born to do HR. I did not fall into it. I chose it, and that's what I've been doing ever since I finished school.
And in the national market, I'm sure you see a lot of things. And one of the things I'm seeing is just the number of HR related lawsuits, whether it's discrimination from hiring managers asking stupid questions to firing people or trying to hire, an employee as a contractor, whatever the case may be. And when we were talking the other day, from my perception, I feel like lawsuits are far more prevalent today than they were before. So I looked up EEOC filings, and I think that confirmed both of our suspicions. 2021, 61,000 EEOC filings. 2023, 81,055. 2024, 88,531. 2025, upwards of 91,000 and some change. So yes, lawsuits related to HR related items are far more prevalent today.
Yeah, and for those of you that have never been a party to such a lawsuit, it's just as annoying and painful and costly as you think it might be, whether it's valid or not. And let's hope that it's not valid, but even if it's not, you have to go through the explanation. You've got to come up with the documentation, and so you don't want to find yourself in that situation.
So discrimination filings right now are like next level. And what's funny from my perspective, let's say you have a highly specialized hospital that needs a CEO, someone from highly specialized experience in that market. And then a casino floor manager applies to the position, and you ask them a stupid question and then they don't get the job. Why is it they didn't get the job? Is it because they're a casino floor manager and they're applying for a CEO position in a hospital? Or is it because they're discriminated against and they felt discriminated against? Their perception, unfortunately, is our reality in my mind, right?
Yeah, exactly. Perception is reality, and you have to do some things to manage that, right? So not asking bad questions, um, and educating your managers, educating anyone doing interviewing about what's okay and what's not okay. What I will say to your listeners is that I personally think, and I don't have stats on this, but I personally think your risk is bigger with the internal recruiting decisions or the non-promotions or the people that didn't get the job, because, and there's one main reason for that, and that is because those employees, they know you and they know how you
Mhm.
think, and they know that maybe you're a little bit sneaky, and or they have the perception that, you know what, this person doesn't care about me, and they have it in for me, and that's why I didn't get the promotion. And so familiarity breeds that contempt. And so personally, I think you're just as much, if not more, at risk with those internal promotions, because you can get sued because Sally, the young, cute, up and coming person, got promoted, and the older, maybe a little
Mhm.
bit different, maybe in a protected classification, that person didn't get promoted. And that's a big risk. Don't just think, I can just promote whomever. You need to be thoughtful about that just as much as when you're hiring external candidates.
That is a Really, really good point. The reality is employees know the laws, so you've got to know the laws too.
Yeah,
You
you've
just
got to know you've got to know the laws, and there's probably some that affect you that you do not realize. The clients that I deal with, they just do not know. They don't know what they don't know, and they ha don't have the time to look into it. And so they're out there making decisions um that are not always good.
so the big one, the big overhead discrimination laws, Civil Rights Act of 1964, Title VII. A lot of people think they know all about Title VII and what it is and who is subject to Title VII laws and compliance, but it's actually rather ambiguous. Even if you're a super small business and you think you don't meet those criteria, the reality is you probably do. So you have, I looked these up the other day and they have changed. These have evolved over the years. So Rights Act of 1964, Title VII, you have to meet three conditions. One, employee threshold. You have to have 15 or more employees for each working day in each of every 20 or more calendar weeks in the current calendar year or the preceding calendar year. However, these weeks do not need to be consecutive.
Mm.
So that's kind of tricky. Okay, well, so what is an employee? Those employees might be temporary, part time, that includes employment agency people. So these are not just FTEs.
So
You
my
have,
advice on a lot of these things is act as if you're covered. Okay, maybe you've got two employees, you don't need to worry about it. But even then, just because you maybe you can't be sued by the federal government, maybe this EEOC will dismiss a charge or not file a charge. There's civil claims. You could be charged in civil court for, breach of
Mhm.
contract or any number of claims. And so, why not just act above board and have a good documented process when you hire, fire, change compensation, discipline, and then you never have to worry about whether I'm covered or and all the technicalities.
Yeah, it was funny. I was looking at, all the technicalities because when I go down a wormhole, I love going down these wormholes and looking who does not have to comply with this. Certain religious organizations have a broad exemption, bunny
Yeah.
ears. They may discriminate on the basis of religion, but not race, color, sex, or national origin,
Mhm.
except in very, very limited instances.
Yeah.
So I had some
And
fun with AI because, like, I use AI for a lot of research. My favorite AI personality is Ara, Grok. And
okay.
so I asked her, so if I wanted to hypothetically start a small cowboy church, and
Hmm.
we know that in Texas, cowboys and Indians have not necessarily gotten along. Could I discriminate against Indians if I had a small cowboy church as a religious institution?
No, you couldn't legally discriminate against Native Americans just for being Native American. Race discrimination is illegal under federal civil rights law, and courts have ruled that religious beliefs don't override the government's strong interest in stopping racial discrimination, like in the Bob Jones University case. Churches can limit membership based on shared religious beliefs, but not on race. Cowboy churches in Texas generally welcome everyone anyway. Hypothetically, trying that would probably get you sued and lose your tax exempt status fast.
Okay,
Oops.
so it probably wouldn't be worth it.
Yeah, and there can be a bona fide reason to discriminate based on religion. But I would tread very carefully based on that. I know a nonprofit that in their interview process, one of their questions for a senior HR person that I know was, "Hey, tell us about your faith. Tell us about your beliefs." And this nonprofit's reason for that was, "Hey, we're founded in religious faith. I
Hmm.
wouldn't encourage anyone to do something like that unless you had an attorney you know, no pun intended, I guess, bless bless that act. That could be very risky. I know another business that mentions religion in its some of its core values and stuff. And but don't get me wrong, I think there is a lot of merit to that in spirit, but you could be playing with fire a little bit in that regard if someone were to make a claim later and they could pull up a document and say, look, they mentioned this specific, faith. I'm not of that faith and I was let go. Now you have a little nexus there of an what they call animus, meaning like an antipathy or a dislike for anything other than a certain thing. Now you've got documentation. You don't want to be creating that.
What are some of the bonehead interview questions that you've encountered by people that, could be perceived as blatant discrimination, but the interviewer may not realize that they're asking a discriminatory question?
Yeah, I mean, some of the common ones are asking about family name, like, oh, is that Czech, or is that German, or ooh, that's an interest. Is that an African name? And maybe it's usually 99.9% of the time it's natural curiosity, right?
Hmm.
Or maybe asking about a gap on a resume. Oh, did you have kids? Did you take some time off to have kids? Right? These are natural. You're just curious. You're trying to form a bond. I get it. But now, like I said, you've created a link in the mind of an applicant that, okay, this person's asking about my African name. They're asking about kids. Now, from this point forward, if anything bad happens to you, like you don't get hired or you didn't get the promotion or whatever, now you've got a very easy thing for that person to grab onto. And here's the key thing too. If you don't have a good relationship with that person, they're much more likely to just assume the worst, right? Oh, Ryan asked me about my African name. He must not like people of African descent.
Hmm.
That was probably why. And if Ryan is not a nice guy and he didn't create a relationship with me, then I am very likely to come to that conclusion, right? So I encourage if you want to reduce your risk, develop good relationships with your people.
I think a
Yeah.
lot of times it's the most impatient people who jump into an interview unprepared and they ask silly questions coming out and they're not necessarily coming at it from a point of contention or anything negative or discriminatory. Even when they say, well, wow, you've got an amazing background, but I don't see any dates on your education. Are you worried about age discrimination or something like that? What's the deal?
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
very bad question. Bad, bad, bad question. Because it doesn't matter if that person's a casino floor manager and they applied for that hospital CEO gig. If they don't get the job, that's now, something that's going to stick in their mind, to your point, especially if I don't build a relationship. So
Yeah, yeah, that's a great example. We don't want to age discrimination is another one that you want to avoid for sure.
so what are some of the other areas that you're seeing more prevalent these days?
I think the biggest one that businesses need to be aware of has to do with how people are paid. I mean, I don't know about you, but I work for money. I do
Hmm.
love what I do, but I probably wouldn't do it for free. And so your employees are no different. And so how you pay them is going to be a very sensitive topic. And if you're not paying them overtime, and you should be, that's a huge problem. If you are not paying them for time that they worked, I dealt with a case early in my career of a manager who had some employees come do some work. And in exchange for their work, they didn't get money. They got some furniture that the restaurant didn't need anymore.
That reminds me of Napoleon Dynamite working in a chicken farm.
Well, I don't remember that. I don't remember that part. But you need to pay for money. What did he get paid there?
They got eggs
Eggs, yeah.
at the
And that
chicken
may
farm.
sound cute and everything, and maybe
Yeah.
your employees want eggs or they want furniture, and you may think, oh, this is nice. I'm helping them out. Maybe the furniture is worth, a lot of money. But that the Department of Labor doesn't care about that. They don't care about that. And the biggest when I so you can actually go and look at the Department of Labor claims and judgments that have been filed against people. It's public information. And the number one thing, and that's not doesn't include necessarily EEOC, but the number one thing is wage and hour. It's unpaid wages or not paid overtime. The restaurant industry is a huge violator. I know of a restaurant company that there was a manager that allowed an employee to clock in under two different names, so that person never got into overtime. So one on day one she was Sally, and on day two she was Josie, right? And so when we paid Sally and Josie on
Hmm.
every 2 weeks, well, really it was the same person, and it was all to just reduce overtime and to make it so that the big bosses didn't get on their case about overtime. You can't do that. You can't,
Yeah.
you can't. That's a big problem. And not only will you get sued by the employee, but the federal government will look at not just one location, but they'll look at multiple locations. Don't do it. And then for companies that are more office based, it's very common to classify people as salaried when they really shouldn't be. They should be, some of them should be paid hourly. And you could, again, be looking at back wages for tens of thousands of dollars or more.
We also see the independent contractor versus W-2 employee issue with a lot of employers.
Yeah.
And there are, essentially two entities govern that. You have the IRS, which looks at the degree of control you have over the employee.
Mhm.
And then, like you said, the Department of Labor, and the Department of Labor is going to look at how dependent that employee is on you. And you're not going to be sneaky. You're not going to beat the government. If it's an employee, it's an employee. I
Yeah.
wouldn't mess around with it.
Yep. Yep. And I think again, a lot of these things, they come down to just a lack of knowledge. You just think, oh, oh, it's overtime. Oh, they want to be salaried. That's easy. Well, just because the employee says they want to be salaried today doesn't mean they want to be salaried tomorrow. So
Yeah.
when that lawsuit arrives, you're going to find out.
Policy, right? Policy empowers people, it empowers you. Policies are good.
Yeah, and having an advisor, right? Having an advisor that can review that stuff and say, hey, this is something I would change. You're probably good here, and here you really need to change that, right?
Geography. So there are so many employers moving to Texas, and I think Texas is known to be sort of an employer-friendly state, but does that mean you're less likely to be sued in Texas than you are in California? What are your thoughts there?
I do think that you are less likely, right? There's a lot fewer laws. There's a lot fewer potential mistakes you can make in Texas than California. Some say that the federal circuit, courts are more liberal, right? And so there's different things at play there. But at the end of the day, the federal laws that are the most common problems, we're talking about Americans with Disabilities Act, Title VII, wage and hour laws. Those apply to everyone. It doesn't matter where you are. They all apply. And yeah, you could get in trouble with the state of California for not, giving someone their special overtime that you get when you work over 8 hours in a day. And yeah, that's a problem too. But it's not a get out of jail free card just because you're in Texas, by no means. And it's not a get out of jail free card just because there is a, conservative person in the White House. The government likes money. And one of the ways they can get money is finding out who broke the law. And if
Hmm.
you're breaking the law, then they have a revenue opportunity. So I wouldn't expect enforcement to always be light just because you know there's a Republican in the White House.
Is that the common sort of ideology?
Generally, and you've heard, the president Trump has talked about, um, his feelings on, he's very open about his feelings on a lot of different things.
Hmm.
Um, and and when it comes to discrimination law, I would expect an uptick in what they call reverse discrimination, meaning let's say a Caucasian person saying, "Hey, I was discriminated against." And there was a recent federal case that basically it made it slightly easier for someone to make that type of a claim.
Hmm.
And that's a perfectly, it is a valid claim to make under the law. And so people may be more empowered now to try to make that type of claim.
That is a great point. As a matter of fact, I have data on that. Retaliation claims are way up.
Mm,
So are these reverse discrimination claims, which is funny because the idea of reverse discrimination makes me crazy because it's like discrimination is discrimination, you know,
yeah.
but I get where they're coming from. Yeah, and a lot of it has to do with AI hiring tools and DEI practices.
Mm.
With a lot of the DEI implementations that went into effect 2020, 2021, you know, a lot of people have a problem with that. And so they're raising a red flag and filing suit, federal suit.
Yeah, absolutely. You need to educate yourself on that and find, figure out if what you're doing is going to attract the anger of the administrators that are in place right now. And you're exactly right about AI. One lawsuit is against a video interviewing software that it wasn't properly translating and hearing the things that people said with certain accents and things. And
Hmm.
so basically, it was just rejecting people with certain accents and certain characteristics, whereas a human being would have been able to handle that. And so that's a huge risk if you are allowing a system to make decisions like that. Workday is a huge HR software that has a class action lawsuit about age discrimination right now due to AI. So I would tread super lightly in the AI world when it comes to decision making like that.
And going back to geography, so here's a question. I'm based in Texas. I've got employees in 38 states, but does that mean I can treat those employees under Texas laws, or do I have to follow the laws of their home state?
You got to follow the laws in the home state. If they're there, they're protected. And so you need to know all those, and that can be overwhelming, right? But you need to familiarize yourself, and there's leave laws, maternity leave laws, sick leave entitlements, break laws, wage and hour laws, and sometimes the municipalities. I just got a notice the other day about some city in Washington where the size of the employer dictates the minimum wage, and it's starting at $19 an hour
Good
for
Lord.
small employers. So that's a lot of money to pay to have a minimum wage, but you better know what your minimum wages are where you're operating.
One of the laws I see frequently, or one of the categories of laws that I encounter frequently is the wage transparency in
Mhm.
in recruitment and in advertising, and a lot of people I think are not aware of this. And there are so many different states and municipalities that have their own individual laws, and whether or not you are aware of the law doesn't matter. You're going to get nailed.
Yeah, this is going to get more common. Um, you know, Applicants don't like to have their time wasted, and when there's no pay range, they're going to feel like that. And if you're in a state like Colorado or many other states right now where you have to put a pay range, you can't leave it off, and you can't put, hey, 15K to 200K. That's just not going to get the job done. And looks like we're pulling up here a list of states that have that. And you might be surprised that your state or your county or your city has this type of thing. And the other thing is, I think what you might also be looking at is, can we ask about your pay history before we make an offer? That's something that could be banned in your state. So, hey, what was your pay rate in your last job? Because again, that makes people feel like, hey, just because I got paid 70K, at my last job, there's no reason I can't get 150K in this job. So that's another thing to be aware of.
I love this site. The HR dive, I keep it on my desktop because these laws are literally changing weekly, either at the municipal level, the state level. You can go into the site alphabetically, check out the state, and then you can click on a lot of these links and look at the specific law and what the verbiage is in the law to ensure that you're compliant.
Yeah, in a lot of states, you can't ask about criminal background before you make an offer. So I would just, my general advice is don't even ask until after you've made an offer, regardless of the state that you're in, just to stay safe. I mean, who cares? Like you'll find out when you find out, right? So that's another thing to be aware of.
And then in some municipalities, some states like California has the what is it? It's FEHA. It is the Fair Employment and Housing Act,
Hmm.
which essentially says in an interview scenario, you cannot ask about non-job related items. So that makes it so tough to get to know somebody. And how do you gauge culture if you can only talk about job related items? How would you approach that, Mike?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the easy answer on that is, talking about their last job. What did you like? What did you not like? What were your day-to-day duties? Like, what frustrated you? What were you proud of? What were some things that you would have done differently? Why did you leave that job? What was your kind of thought process of why you left that job? To me, those are all job related
Hmm.
questions, and they kind of get at the motivation of a person, how they think. What was your relationship like with your manager? Was it effective? Tell me about a manager that you didn't get along with as well. Oh, well, she was micromanager and she never let me do this and that. And, it's amazing how many candidates go on rants about their former employers or former
Hmm.
managers. And from a culture perspective, you can build a picture of how this person thinks. And are they a person that goes the extra mile? Do they have a victim mentality? Are they a problem solver? And those are the things that really matter in culture, right? It doesn't really matter what church you go to. It doesn't really matter, if you watch SEC football or not. What matters is the way you go about your work. And that's what matters. That's what matters. That's what's going to help your business be successful and make money or. And so focus on that stuff and you'll be fine no matter what state you're in.
What if, Mike, before our interview, I saw your Facebook profile and you made a really interesting post about your previous employer? Tell me about that.
Well, I certainly wouldn't bring it up. And there actually, this is another one. Like, I'm pretty sure there's some laws that you can't look at people's social media.
Mm.
I'm not saying that I've never done that. But you don't want to mention it to the person. You don't want to ask them about it. And try to avoid it, like if you can, because you don't want any thoughts in your head about this person and their personal life. But it is something that I realize that people will do, and just tread very carefully about that kind of thing.
So there are so many ways we can get sued. There's so many laws out there. I mean, just point blank, how do we avoid getting sued?
I guess if I had one tip, that one key to unlock everything, it would be, and this is maybe counterintuitive, but is have good relationships with your employees. Because when you have good relationships, they'll come to you with problems. They'll say, "Hey, you know what? I'm feeling uncomfortable with a coworker." They'll say, "Hey, you know what? I didn't get overtime. Like, can we talk about that?" And you'll be much less likely to get sued if you have a now that's not a get out of jail free card, but that is a hack that you really should be doing. And I guess the other thing I would advise is have a partner that you can call, an HR partner that can advise you when those things come up. Hey, am I doing the right thing here? That will give you peace of mind, and it will in the long run protect your business.
Mike, this is all good stuff. Thank you so much for joining us today. Hopefully, a lot of people out there who were moving at light speed, building their businesses, heard something valuable. I know I did. And on that note, I know you've got people to take care of. So do I. So let's get back to work.
All right.
This has been the Stark Lane podcast. You can find us on YouTube, Spotify, and wherever you find the programs to elevate your career and your passions. Now, get back to work.